Good evening, Cedar Falls, and welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting for February 28th, 2022, and I will call this meeting to order. Our one item on tonight's agenda is a review of the FY 2023 budget. This is a special meeting called on an off council meeting night so that council has the opportunity to discuss some proposed changes to the budget that were requested back during our last regular council or Committee of the Whole meeting. So we'll have this opportunity tonight to go through council's proposals. We will be looking for a motion at the end to approve any combined changes together, vote on those and send that in for modification of the city's budget, which will be presented in a hearing next week at our regular council meeting along with the public hearing. So tonight, since we are going to have a motion at the end that goes forward for additional action by staff, I'll allow public comment during that motion, or if the motion fails, we have multiple, there'll be a chance for the public to speak on each of those. So if you're in the gallery tonight, we'd be welcome to have you speak at the appropriate time. And then also we have Zoom open, and we'll look to have any speakers on Zoom raise their raise hand icon or press star 9 on your phone to be able to participate. And again, I'll cue you on when that time is during this meeting. So with that, I'll open it up for our Budget and Finance Director. That is Jennifer Rodenbeck, and she has a short presentation to kick us off tonight. So Director Rodenbeck.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of start off by just reminding kind of where we're at in the process right now. And I think Ron and I are just going to kind of do a tag team on some of the information tonight. So again, just a reminder, this is just the schedule that we showed at the last meeting. You know, where we're at. Obviously, we've published the maximum levy, held the hearing on that last time, set the date for March 7th to have the public hearing. So we've really accomplished all those steps. So really the last thing is just, again, tonight, give directions to staff about if there's any changes you want to come forward on March 7th, and then hold the public hearing and make sure we get it filed by the deadline. Just a reminder, too, that the rate we're talking about is $11.67. The current year, we're $11.38. This is just the notice that was in your packet, and I'm just putting this in here so you can see the $11.67 rate. Again, there's that confusion about the maximum levy rate, so I just kind of want to remind people again kind of where we're at and what step. And so the rate we'll be talking about tonight is the total rate, all of our levies, so $11.67. And then just a reminder real quick again how that impacts the different properties. So you'll see with residential, when you factor in the revaluation that the county did, so again, that's you know, something for this year that we don't have every year, the 6.35%. Factor in the rollback, you'll see that for a $100,000 house, we'd be talking about about $30 per year increase in taxes paid, or a 4.65%. Commercial and industrial, you'll see 2.55% increase. And for multi-residential, because the rollback's going down, they'll actually see a decrease of just a little over 3%. So again, and again, that's with the budget proposed with the $11.67 rate. We went through last time just some of the challenges this year, you know, about residential rollback decreasing, multi-residential phasing out, backfill phasing out, high project costs, personnel costs, health insurance fund, technology costs, liability insurance. Those were just a lot of the challenges we had this year in putting the budget together. So with that, again, I think for the purpose tonight, it was to talk about whether anybody wanted to propose any decreases. So I think at this time, City Administrator Ron Gaines is going to just maybe go through the ones that we heard from council members.
So Mayor, City Council members, on your desk you may have this spreadsheet that Jennifer Rodenbeck and her staff put together with regard to these are what staff heard from council members, elected officials during the last budget, or since the last week. Just real quick, on the left side of the paper, obviously, are the 7 items that are suggested on being cut, and I'll go real quickly through. If you look at the cumulative total, then it's about $365,000 that would be cut out of the the FY23 proposed budget. That would take the new levy rate from $11.67 down to $11.49, and the effect on residential from $4.65 down to $3.07, 3.07%, I'm sorry. The effect on a house then would be on a $100,000 house would be approximately $19.68. And if we look at effect on commercial, would be just under 1%, which would be 0.99%. And on the effect on multi-residential, in this particular case then, is a negative 4.62%. So running through that, that's cumulative. That's if the council adopts all of what is suggested here. And real briefly, I'll run through these. So the first suggested item was remove CIP item number 54, the zoning. So if you look on here, what we have under general fund savings is a savings of $90,000. If you recall, there was $150,000 in this line item. So what there's left in the FY22 budget is $90,000. So what we're suggesting is carry that $90,000 over, and that would be, there would still be the $150,000 for FY23, but there would be a $90,000 savings in this particular item there.
And what would happen if we didn't move that 90,000 forward? Where would that go this year?
So as you recall, the council's policy is any of those general fund savings move on into the one-time capital improvements. So that's where that $90,000 would end up, if it remained $90,000. Item number 2, remove CIP number 55, rental conversion. And as you recall, this is $100,000 each year in the budget. This year, currently, what we're estimating for the end of FY22 would be $70,000. So what we're also suggesting is taking this $70,000, carrying it over, but eliminating the $70,000 out of the rental conversion for this year. So again, showing a general fund savings of $70,000 for this year. Now, for both of those items, if we would go back up the following year and say for item number 54 and item number 55, restore those at $100,000 and $150,000, those would show tax increases for the following year. Item number, or the next item would be delay. CIP number 56, housing needs assessment for FY24. That's showing a $35,000 general fund savings for this year. But again, if that's delaying it till FY24, that would show an increase in that particular year. Delay CIP number 59, resilience plan implementation from FY24. Again, another $25,000 savings in the FY23 general fund savings, but adding that back in the following year would be an increase. Delay CIP number 131, cemetery columbariums. That's showing a $60,000 savings. This is also one that at the end, this would be a revenue source, but obviously it would take several years to recoup those monies. Cut CIP number 138, the EAB, cut about 50% of that out of the budget. I think for the most part, much of the EAB has been removed from city right-of-way and city properties. What we have left is our program moving forward that would help cash fund this with regard to private properties. And then the last item that we have on here is remove the part-time human resources position, which shows a general fund savings of about $60,000. With regard to that, we do have a full-time position that is shown, that is was suggested by our racial equity task force. That would be a full-time staff person that would aid the racial equity, or would aid Human Rights Commission. That position would be staffed under our under our human resources. So we would expect to use some of those human resources, some of the capacity in that person to help pick up for this removing the part-time human resources position. So I think that's a summary, Mayor, of what we've heard from the elected officials, and you can see what the results happen there. So we'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, and what I'd like to do for the sake of the discussion tonight is I'd like to propose having a motion brought forward to have this list of proposed cuts, have that motion and seconded so that we can discuss it. And then at that point, bring in either, like as part of the discussion, amendments to add or remove. If you have questions about these items, that wouldn't require an amendment because that's already in the motion. But then if you have additional items that you would like to propose, I think the cleanest way to go forward would be to make your proposal as a motion to amend, have a second, and then discuss that item, vote that up or down, move to the next item. Does that sound okay? All right, so with that then, I would ask for a motion to have the proposed cuts for the FY23 budget added to the 23 budget. Is there a motion for that?
I'll make a motion for it.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and seconded. So this opens up the big conversation, and this could take a while to get through, but there are plenty of questions, I'm sure, for these items and then for additions or other changes you want to make. So I'll open the floor for that as simple amendments or discussions of the items. Councilmember DeBeer.
Okay, just a question. On the two items that were moved to FY24, would they then be discussed in goal setting next year? Or would they just automatically go on for the next FY24?
They would be goal-setting topics.
I was just going to add, Susan, they would show on the CIP again. So as you're reviewing the CIP, that would also be an opportunity you could talk about them too for next year.
But if it's marked FY23, that's automatic. Like the first one from FY22 to 23, that's an automatic. We would not need to discuss that again.
Correct. One of the things we may want to do, if council would like, is we could do a resolution then as part of the budget. How do I want to say, with wording saying that these will be dedicated to these items, for FY23. So just to make it clear, if we feel like that necessary, we can do that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if they just then competed with the things on the unmet needs category or...
I've got a question for item 54 for zoning. It says to remove it from the CIP, but my understanding was that what we would do is still have $150,000 available for this year or this upcoming fiscal year to spend on it. Does this change from that discussion at all?
No, I think I worded that way because that's how it came to me, was to remove it, but then I kind of added the part in the parentheses about reserving 90,000, and then as Ron described, and just to assure people there'd still be 150,000 then. So you're right, Mayor, really maybe the better wording would be amend that item to say from 150,000 to 60, I guess.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure folks knew that because council had asked previously to have that item re-added, it still is in there. It's just a different way of funding it that saves us some funds.
Yep.
And does that have any impact from this year? I mean, we will be spending less over 2 years than we projected. Instead of 300,000 on it, we would be down to, the math.
10.
What's that?
Or,
Less. So, but is that going to cause a problem at all from what our expectations were?
No, I don't think so. And, I think when it came up that night, I think it was maybe Council Member Gamfield who had asked the question if we had any leftover from this year. I think that was a couple meetings ago, actually. And so obviously worked with Stephanie and Karen to see where we were at with the contract. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't some outstanding thing yet on the contract for this year that we're still going to need to spend. But I think we were comfortable at this point knowing there probably wasn't more work that we were going to do before the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. So just so I have that math right, we originally was going to be 150,000. Since we only apparently spent 60,000 this year, we have 90,000 remaining. of that. So that would put us at a total of 210,000 over 2 years. So, does that math work?
I
Right,
think you're
Mike?
going to be at about 240, Mayor. Because you'll have 150 for FY '23 because the 90's carrying over. And then,
Okay. So glad we have math people here. That's fantastic. All right.
I mean-
So,
Well,
Go
actually,
ahead.
what I was going to say is, I think for the current year, we only had 100,000 budgeted
oh.
for the current year. That's what I was
Okay.
going to say.
Yeah,
But-
that's where the math's different. Thanks.
and so with regard to that, Mayor, as well, just a reminder that staff was given the direction on the downtown zoning that we wouldn't pick that up until the council is ready to proceed.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Mr. Mayor, just appreciate the creative attempt at a solution there. On the same line, I'm looking at the emerald ash borer removal. Do we have any funding left over from that on public funds for or public areas for the 50,000 from this year?
Well, I think my understanding is that the council person that submitted that, I think, had actually talked to Brian Heath, and I think thought that I'm not sure for this year. I think they thought they would be spending what they have for this year, but maybe wouldn't need it all for 23. Did I state that okay, Brian? Okay.
All right. I was under the understanding that leaving up the dead trees could present a further complication. We'd want to get rid of them as quickly as possible. Would that leave you enough to accomplish the public parks or public properties tree removal?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and just for housekeeping, as we move forward, if you want to do additional amendments, I hope that we can get through these items first. If you have any questions related to these, work our way through that, and then we can pick up on amendments. So, Councilor Whitwer.
Well, I have a question on the cemetery one. How long does it take to build these? And because they are a potential revenue source, I'm wondering if we're sure that's something that we would want to put off for another year. Is there a need for it now? I've not heard any real report about it.
I don't believe delaying it'll be that big a deal. The vaults come pre-made, so they won't take long to install. As Ron said, that in the future it may be a revenue generator, but it would take some time to fill up.
So there's not a huge need for them or demand for them right now. Sorry.
So that's kind of how this project came to be. And I'm going to say around 2018, 2019, there was a more of a need for the cremation services and a spot for those. So that's when this project came into the CIP, was around the 2018, 2019 for this year. So we have seen an increase in those types of services. So at some point, we're going to need additional space for that.
Okay. So currently they have to take a regular gravesite.
We still have other space available for those, but this is kind of a new space saver in our cemeteries that we'd like to start to utilize. So.
So on item 55, what commitments do we already have for the rental house conversions?
As I say, I can start, and Stephanie might be able to add in, but I think we've already done one grant already in FY22. I think they have an application right now that's in. And then I think just to kind of be safe, we decided to maybe leave, knowing that might be another one that could possibly come in before the end of the year. That's why we picked 70,000.
Do we have a requirement? Did we set, I mean, is there something out there that says, hey, this is here every year? Or can we pull that without any ramifications from concern?
I wouldn't say there's any legal requirements. I think it's more based on that's what we probably advertised, is that it's available. So I think for us, I think the only reason we'd be a little worried is if someone came to us a few months and said, hey, I saw that, want to put an application, and then we're like, oh, we took that money and moved it to 23. So I think that's why we were giving ourselves just a little bit of buffer to allow at least for maybe another application to come in, just in case one would come in.
And typically each year, how much, is it 100,000 that's usually in there each year?
Correct.
And how many years has that been?
Oh, is it 6 years?
Yeah, 5 or 6.
FY16? Since FY16.
On average, how many applications or how many people make it through that process each year?
So early on, the program wasn't utilized much, maybe one or two for the first couple of years. But after that, it significantly picked up. And I think there was, what, Stephanie, maybe a couple that were at 100% where we used all of it, all of the monies, but not having that in front of me right now.
And the council's direction for this upcoming fiscal year was to expand it out to the rest of the city. So not increasing the dollar amount, but allowing more projects to potentially apply for it. So it could increase in the years ahead. Hopefully.
Do we know what our, excuse me, do we know what our goal is for a council? What's everybody, like, what are we trying to drop this by? I know there was a mention of 0. I don't know that that's realistic in my eyes, but I'm just wondering, where are we trying to get?
I think cutting it in half to start with would be maybe a realistic and something that we can aspire to, and then if we can get further. But to start with, can we cut 50% or not?
Okay.
I didn't have a set percentage. I just wanted to look at where we could reduce without a lot of negative impact to the city.
Sure, and that's my concern is you know, I'm not, it's not a secret, I'm not needing to reduce anything out of here, but I know that I'm one of 7, so we're having this discussion. My concern is that we make sure we're funding investments in infrastructure and not taking away monies to, I don't want to stifle progress. I feel like old farmers used to say, you got to spend money to make money. I understand that, you know, we are in a time where we need to, you know, have the discussion and maybe kick it back a little bit or just delay some things. But I don't want to put us behind the 8 ball where we've underfunded something and all of a sudden it's costing us more a little bit down the road, or we're putting people in danger, things like that. And I'm assuming that's probably all of our intentions, but I just want to make sure I say it, that's at some point you can defund stuff or take away the funding, but it might cost you more money in the end. So that's my concern, is that we remember infrastructure and investment in things that will help us grow and make money are important.
Councilor Harding.
On the remove the part-time human resource position, is that something that we feel as a city we really need? Is that something that's the one worrisome thing? The other things seem pretty creative and seem like we can move some stuff around, which I like. That position, is it going to be too much of a stretch to put 2.5 jobs on 2 people in the future? And I'm just asking, you know, if it is, that's something, because putting a lot of pressure on staff can end up costing us money or losing staff. So that's the big worry that I have. So thoughts on that?
I'm going to let Jen do this because that's her staff.
Well, originally why I had submitted the request, as all departments were looking for, you know, positions and where do we feel like we need help. I can tell you in our department, human resources, finance is an area that I think we got to staff working a lot of hours and doing that. And, you know, a lot of that is, I also understand, we may say it's an unusual year with COVID. We've spent a lot of time tracking stuff with COVID, dealing with policies with COVID, you know, having to answer employee questions. Am I out? Am I not out? And as much as I'd like to say that's an unusual thing, it just seems like there's constantly more regulations in human resources and things we got to do. And so that was the original request. Now, in saying that, I understand there was also the equity position or the full-time position. We want to talk about that, whether that was combined with human rights, racial equity task force, you know, it was kind of all that thought. And so, you know, I think my concern is I thought I was hearing that people really wanted a full-time position for those activities. And so I didn't feel like they were maybe necessarily going to have time to do the human resource stuff, and that's why I felt like still needed to request it. Now, in saying that, I also understand it's a new position. you kind of never know how things are going to work, or are they going to be 100% consumed by those duties? It is a tough one. You know, you never know. So I think for us, we also knew that we would probably hire that full-time position first, see how things go, and then we would have went to the part-time position. So that's why when there was discussion, I was like, well, you know, maybe delaying that, maybe we were going to do that anyway. So, but I think your concern's valid, Simon. Obviously, that's why we requested it. I think there's a lot of things going on in human resources and finance.
So what would be the impact if you did that in reverse? Did part-time and seeing if you would go full-time?
Maybe I'll just jump in here. I think what would happen there is I think right away you're going to see that person have a lot of duties or new duties with the Human Rights Commission and getting their feet on the ground and maybe not being able to discern how much the workload actually is. Whereas I think if we have a full-time person in there and they're able to spend the 40 hours to get themselves acclimated, about the time that we would come back to you would be goal setting. That person would just be getting their feet on the ground, and so I think that would be the perfect time to start talking about the half-time person again.
Okay.
I echo Councilman Harding's. I think there was data. I passed on data or thoughts from a constituent, and one of the things is we need to remember that I believe the staff per capita in Cedar Falls is incredibly low, and so we're stretching people to the max probably already. I guess I want to know, and maybe but I want to know what staff would cut. Like, I mean, you guys are the ones that do this job every day. I respect you as professionals. I don't know if anybody's comfortable with answering that, but I don't. We can pull things and cut stuff, but you're the ones that are sitting in this doing it every day and know what it takes to run our city. So I'm interested in that because I respect you as the professionals.
So I think really we have identified some of the items, and one of the reasons I think that maybe it's good to identify some of these is their workload. And, you know, we know right now that there is a lot of workload. We've been talking about the budget for a month, and it's extremely time-consuming, just the budget. The public safety officer program that we're talking about is extremely time-consuming. We start talking about other with regard to the downtown code amendments, and that's extremely time consuming. So picking up some of these new initiatives is getting more and more challenging. Staff's willing to do it, and they're willing to put in the work, but I do think you're absolutely right. We do ask a lot of our staff, and one of the things that I think is we've got a great staff, and they're more than willing to put in the extra effort, but at the same time, we can't burn them out. It's the competition out there right now is too challenging when you start looking at the private sector and what the rates are and some of the other conditions where employers are making just to attract and retain staff. So I guess that's just kind of some general comments.
I want to make sure in my one of the seven being a employer of choice. I feel like Cedar Falls is a place, at least I hope it's still a place where people want to work. And I want to make sure that we, as the elected folks in this community, make sure we remember that. I mean, we want to be the best of the best. We need to make sure we keep the best of the best. And so I think it's good when we hear, I mean, we don't want to burn out our staff. And I mean, it's not, I don't know, I'm rambling, but I want to hear about that. I don't want to burn our staff out. I mean, because turnover, it costs money, right? I mean, you hire somebody, then you burn them out, and then you got to go right back to hire them again. I'm not like management, but I do know from my 20-some years of being an adult that costs more money than in the end, right? Plus longevity. I mean, having folks in a place for a long time typically makes for a stronger staff, and training folks as they come up. Those are all things that are important to me. So I hate, I mean, what would this cost? This $60-some thousand. I can't do the math quickly, but what is that in percentage?
Well, so it's $1.50 on a $100,000 home. I mean,
Okay,
look, the
so for
difference
$4.50.
because it goes from $21.36 on $100,000 to $19.68.
Yeah, and I'm not ever going to, I'm not living high on the hog myself. I can appreciate a budget, but for $4.50 to know that, I mean, human resources is pretty important. You're helping to care for the staff as a whole, and then not burning staff out anyway. For $4.50, I think it's good to think about it that way.
So would you like to make an amendment to remove part-time human resource position from this list?
Yes, I would like to make that amendment to strike remove the part-time human resource position.
Okay. So
Second.
it's
Second.
been motion and seconded and open for additional discussion.
I have a question. Did I understand Jen earlier saying that that's something you weren't going to staff probably until after this other person gets going anyway? So,
Well, we thought we would probably hire the full-time one first and then hire the person. So I guess my point is we probably wouldn't hire it right at July 1st. It maybe was going to take a few months and then we would look to do it. But, one of the things that I know we heard last Monday is also about doing an employee assessment survey. So again, knowing there's just things like that I don't think things in human resources are going to get less. But again, you're absolutely right, Susan. You and I had talked about that. I was just saying that might not be a full year because we probably wouldn't get it hired on July 1st. And I think my worry, and for a lot of people's worry about some of these lists, I kind of want to answer your question and back to Kelly's too, is anything we put on the list, I just wanted to reassure people. I, of course, talked to anybody over here at the table about, hey, just let you know, this is one of the items suggested. Is that feasible or not? I was kind of wanted to address your issue about staff adding comments. Or before we even got to proposing a budget here, there was a lot of work we had to do to get where we were. And so those are absolutely conversations Ron and I were having with other departments too about this item, where we're at. So I think just back to yours, Susan, that, for any of these, I think our worry always is you pick something on the list, and Ron kind of mentioned it. We can delay something a year or take it off, and just like Ron said, but that automatically means we're starting next year with increases again. And so my worry is always, just from being a financial person doing this for a long time, is we tend to, when you're doing a budget for this year, we're trying to set the course for the next few years too. As you know that too, Susan, is that we don't want those big spikes and rates and low. It's how can we try to be consistent about some of those? And so I think sometimes when we talk about delaying or removing, I'll go back to the part-time position. I think the concern always is when we come back here next year, will it be there to add back in or not? Some of these other items too. So that's always the worry. Now, again, these were all things that we felt like we can do these, we can live with them. As long as we're going to get them in the next year, okay. But that's maybe just a worry. Does that help?
yeah, but if it's a salary position, then you've already factored that in for the next several years because you've increased the salary.
Correct. Yep.
Is that the salary based on a start date from July till the end of the year?
It is a full year. Yep.
So it's actually...
It probably would be less. Again, that's what I was saying. I was telling Susan, we're not going to hire the person July 1st.
Right.
So, but in saying that, I also know that I think with a lot of things, you never know what other position's going to leave, and we're going to have to hire someone else at a higher rate. So in some ways, these things kind of all work out, it seems like. But
Just to check, though, so in reality, if this position is filled in July or August, their compensation or what we're going to pay is maybe half of that, maybe.
if we didn't hire them till January 1st, right, it'd be half a year, I think is what you're saying.
Okay.
But this is also assuming we're able to hire somebody at the midpoint of our pay range. That's the other thing. Knowing we're in a tough environment, recruiting and all that, we may not be able to hire the person at a mid-range. We tend to, when we put things in the budget, try to shoot for that mid-range. It just seems like kind of a safe thing to do. It's not the minimum, it's not the maximum. So we might also have to hire someone that's more expensive, though, too.
But nonetheless, if we remove this, it would be for the 60,320. Or if we kept it, that would be our.
Right, or I guess you could give us direction that you want to wait and not hire the person until January 1st. You could give us that direction to hold off and.
I was going to ask that, given that we have an assessment forthcoming, would removing this part-time position for now preclude you from hiring in January should you determine the need to be there? So you'd lose a half a year waiting on this position to be approved for next July? Okay.
Yeah, I didn't
That's
have
a
any
question.
problem taking it off the list, agreeing
Right.
with the amendment. I just was not
Yep.
sure I understood that you weren't saying we didn't need it.
Right.
Okay, any other discussion on that amendment? So the motion on the floor for the amendment is to strike this item as from the proposed cuts list, which would increase or have the budget back up $60,320.
Just one final thought. Given that we're looking at $25,000 items on some other line items, would we be able to cut this one in half and give us the opportunity to hire January 1st?
Yeah, you can give us that
So
direction.
I guess I'd like to make a motion to amend the amendment to cut that in half rather than in full to save a little bit of money.
I'd second that.
Motion and seconded. So,
I'd second that.
okay, additional discussion on, so basically planning for hiring in January then? Okay. All right, any other discussion on that?
That's, Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
Mr. Mayor, we're not talking about our Human Rights Commission person, are we?
correct. This is
Just
the
this,
human
this is
resources.
just a staff person.
Yep.
Two people?
Just a second additional part-time person.
Okay, thank you.
So we're still wanting to get a full-time.
Okay, so anything else? Then just for the amendment to make this a January start position if it's approved in the amendment. So for a January start position, or start time for a $30,000 change, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so that does pass for the amendment to make this now a potential removal of the human rights position for a start time planned in January. Any final discussion?
Human resource.
I'm sorry, did I say wrong?
Right.
I'm sorry,
It's all right.
I'm sorry.
I just don't
I
want
don't have
someone
my
to
glasses
email
on.
us and say,
So remove change the part-time human resources position, okay, to start in January. Thanks for that. So if no other discussion, then this is just to amend the primary document. So all in favor of this amendment, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so that amendment does pass and is added back into the document. So we will not remove the part-time human resources position, but we will plan to have that start date for that position in January, which will save about $30,000 roughly for the next fiscal year. Okay, other items that you want to discuss either removing, or do you want to discuss removing at this point?
I was thinking we'd maybe go in a logical order, but we've already started at the bottom and moved up. But so if we're starting at the bottom, I have a follow-up question for Brian. So taking 20 to follow up, I think Dustin or someone asked, is 25,000 enough to get your work done?
Yes, it is.
So if we take this 25,000 out, we're still protecting our liabilities with these ash trees falling over, or concern about that?
Yeah, we're comfortable we can get this done with that
Okay.
amount.
Thank you.
Not only that, but as Director or Administrator Gaines mentioned, this will also help us cash flow our private ash tree endeavor that we're going to be facing here shortly.
Good.
So, and just to be clear, Brian, what does this not allow us to do since we've dropped 25,000?
I think we're ahead of schedule, so that amount was put in there several years back, not knowing how the progress was going to go. So our progress went really well, and it was done in a timely manner. So I don't think it's going to impact us in any way other than if we get ahead of ourselves with the private ash tree removal before we start recouping some of those dollars.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks to your staff for the excellent work then.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I think just to reiterate a thanks to finding those savings for us as we're all seeking to find some savings. I think back to Councilmember Dunn's question earlier, it's good to try and find some nice to haves that we don't have to do this year. I think that's kind of one of the goals I want to look at, while also not cutting any potential revenue sources. So I'd like to open a little bit of discussion about the columbariums. I'm assuming we're putting in 2 per year at that $60,000. Would the cost of installation go up astronomically if we were to do the 1 this year and essentially cut that line item in half for this year instead of 60,000 removed, 30,000 removed?
So
We're putting in 2 per year.
Yeah.
Would it go up installation costs?
we're looking at 72 niche columbariums. There's 72 spaces per columbarium. These are pretty basic. The cost of one of those niches is our 72 niche is about $20,000, but then you got landscaping, concrete, amenities to create that space, so to speak. So I don't know what the cost will do in the future, to answer your question, but we were hoping to do at least 2. We're trying to do. We got 3 cemeteries. We got it in for a 3-year period, 60,000 for 3 years, and then we were hoping to outfit at least our 2 main cemeteries in town, and then possibly Hillside out on Lone Tree Road. However, it just it's going to depend on how well they're received and how quickly we recoup some of them dollars.
If you were to say we can only put in 1, would you have an opportunity to put it in one place and then see how it fills, to then put another in the other cemetery next year?
Yeah, that we could do. What we would probably do in that case is probably just pick one cemetery, and we were thinking Fairview to start with, and then what we do is create the landscape area for that, put 1 down, and then see how quickly it fills, and then maybe if it generates enough revenue, then maybe you can move forward a little sooner than what's in the CIP.
Could I put you on the spot to say that could be done for 30 or 35
For the landscaping,
for the installation of 1 columbarium?
I would say it'd probably be 40.
40, okay.
Yeah, because there's quite a bit of concrete that you'd have to do, and you need sidewalks going to it, things like that. And obviously you want to make it look nice with your landscape amenities.
Yeah. And at that point, you're committed to 2 anyway because you're laying the foundation.
Correct.
Okay.
So would you like to make a motion to modify that at this point?
I think the installation costs would go up a lot higher than the savings value
Okay.
if we split them out like that.
I'd like to make a motion on the 25,000 before we move on.
Sure.
So to amend the 25,000
The ash borer,
for ash borer, okay.
yeah.
We currently are in it's already currently removed. So
It is,
only
okay.
so you would
Sorry.
only want a motion if you want to put it back in.
No, I want to take it out.
We're already
It's done.
we're there. So
That's
so no
where we're at.
motion necessary.
I guess what I'm aiming at with that columbarium discussion is to try and put in a potential revenue source and see, as Mr. Heath said, that we might recoup some of those funds for later. I'd open to feedback or pushback on that. If the installation cost of splitting them out is going to add about 10 grand per columbarium, it wouldn't make sense to do them one at a time, correct?
Penny wise, pound foolish, right?
Yeah. So that's why I guess I'm okay with still removing them for this year.
Okay. Other items to discuss, re-adding back into the budget from these proposed cuts. Anything else you'd want to discuss before we move on? Okay, so the only thing I'm seeing right now for the amendment is that part-time human resources position, to have that start in January for 30,000, which will change our spreadsheet a little bit. Now we could open it up for discussion if council wants to include any additional items to be cut. And then that I would request an amendment for.
I know I might be regretting bringing this up, but line 36 about the parking lot, downtown parking ramp study. That's $100,000. Could we delay that a year? I feel like we haven't been able to really, and correct me if I'm wrong, staff, but we're not really moving ahead in that right now anyway because we've been taking up other things, right? Because we've been talking about public safety and things that take staff time. So we haven't really moved forward on that parking study yet, right, due to our own requests.
So if I'm recalling correctly, that's the funding source is the downtown TIF, so it really wouldn't have the
Okay.
the impact.
So don't worry about it. Okay, so that
Well,
makes it easy. I'll shut my mouth.
What's a good question, though? Could there be any, like, secondary impacts by doing things like that that help us? Or is it really such a bucket, such a funnel of pay that doing this will have positive repercussions on other parts of the budget?
That's a big question, Mayor.
I'll give you a minute.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, it's maybe not quite an easy answer, but I think to answer your question, I think when you talk about TIF, I don't want to sit here and say, oh, it's TIF, so that has no impacts. It does. It's just that it's long-term. You know, a lot of times with TIF, you're thinking about the long-term. You know, that we know certifying debt in a TIF district, you know, creating the street, sewer, and all that to get buildings eventually, it's kind of like a long haul. You know, you got to kind of be in it for long haul and not have the funds in the general fund. And your hope is eventually you will get revenue released back in the general fund that helps your general fund. It's just that it's kind of a long-term impact. So that's why it's a hard question to answer today of, yeah, it'll save you. Well, when it's tough, you know, with the downtown, what are we going to keep doing in the downtown for projects? So does that help, Mayor?
Yep, very much.
And that's why we don't want TIFs to expire, right? Because it takes a long time.
It does. It's
I get
take a
that.
long time.
Okay.
So there's a lot of questions that I've gotten about TIFs that really need an expert. And, you know, the consensus is, you said there's 5 zones that we have TIFs in. And is that how many TIFs we have, or how many TIFs within those?
That's what we would have. We've had a couple in the past, but they've expired. I'm going to pick when the residential one was done in North Cedar, Foxview, is that what it's called? You know, that was done and expired a long time ago. Now, maybe what you're asking is, I'm not sure, is in our unified district, we do have multiple areas within that district as it got amended, and some have different expiry dates than other ones. So I'm not sure if that's maybe what you're referring to about when you mentioned if there's some in one.
Yeah,
or,
there are the questions that I'm getting. And, you know, there's thoughts that we have 20 TIFs out there. And
no, we have 5 active TIFs.
yeah.
Yeah.
And how to, you know, what's that benefit? Is there a benefit there to help us with any of this?
Sure.
Yes or no, I guess.
Well, like I said, it's long-term. You got to kind of be in it for the long term for your TIF to pay off.
So no, there's nothing that we can do this year to help us out?
Yeah, I don't know what that would be. The other thing that you have to remember is when we're using TIF as a funding source, one of the really important things is it clears up or makes way for other funding sources that may be struggling. For instance, if you have a stormwater project within a TIF district and you can use the TIF, and we all know that stormwater and sanitary funds are very tight, when we can use the TIF, it does create some relief for those particular funds as well.
Okay.
And there's a lot to digest here. I see like council members are looking at some parts, so we'll have some pauses here. That's totally fine before we move forward.
Have some what, Mayor?
Just some, I'm not looking to have, if we need some time to think, It's totally fine, as you're kind of doing some math and things like that. I looked through at least the capital improvements program part and saw just items in here that are GR. We already talked about the columbariums and Admiral Ashbore. There's also pickleball court maintenance at $35,000. And I was just curious for that line item, what would happen if we were to change that amount? If we funded it less, or if we delayed on that, would that be detrimental to the surface?
So we're starting to see issues with the surface of the pickleball courts, and that came up maybe 2 years ago, and Brian has been working with a contractor on what those repairs would cost. I fear that if we wait too long, the surface may deteriorate to a point where we won't be able to do the repair and have to do more of a permanent reconstruction of it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, to add to that, wasn't a lot of it funded originally through private, so we kind of owe it to them to do the maintenance.
I didn't think they were 2 years old, but maybe they've been around longer than.
Okay, well, and does council request to have anything additionally added to this then for cutting?
Only other question I had, Mr. Mayor, on the sirens location, and I'm all for adding them because I often can't hear them in certain sections of town too. Is there any adjustment to those that we could push something off that wouldn't make it completely nonsensical to move them? I mean, there's 60,000 this year and then 15 each following. Is there a little more even?
Dustin, what number is that?
174. Yeah, 174 was that one. So it's 60,000 for this year. Could we even it out a little bit by pushing it apart?
So to answer your question on that, we do have a siren that's failing. It's the one at Lincoln School. So that was what that money was earmarked for, was to actually just replace that siren. We have no plans at this time to expand the coverage because we feel like our coverage is fairly adequate.
So I have no intentions to remove those notification systems then.
Brian, is the 15,000 that's put on that every year just for maintenance on them, and then this one was more because of the replacement one?
That is correct.
Okay, well, I'll take a last call then for additional proposals for items that we can remove. And I'm seeing none, so as you have that spreadsheet in front of you, there was the proposed cuts being remove or modify CIP 54 zoning, remove or rental conversion, or just modify. How are we going to change that language to amend? Then housing needs assessment, delay that to 2024. Delay resilience plan to 2024. Delay CIP 131 cemetery columbariums. Cut CIP 138 for EAB removal of 50%, and then still have or fund the part-time position, but beginning in January. I don't know if that would need to be on this. Would that be considered a cut or just?
Put like a half year or something, part-time human resource position, half year.
Right, okay.
And Mayor, just let you know, my thought was tonight, obviously seeing what was decided tonight, and then obviously what we'll bring back Monday is these changes incorporated into the budget. So what you'll see for a rate Monday night is doing these things and having that be what you'll vote on then. So I'm guessing the rate's going to be about, I don't know, I'll say like $11.50, $11.51. Of course, it has to be an odd number, 3 cents to cut in half, but, you know, of course, right? But, so my point is that we'll have that for you then to actually approve that Monday night and have the public hearing on.
Okay, terrific. So with this vote as amended, if this approves, it'll go as Director Rodenbeck said. If this were voted down, then the budget would remain as is. So just so council's clear on that. So
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
I just have one quick question here. It's on the hiring, 306,000, the difference between 21 and, fiscal year 21-22 and 22-23, that's 306,000. And I guess 3 of those were the library. Is that true? We're hiring 3 people for the library on that one?
No,
And
so
won't that come out of our budget? Excuse me.
No.
Go ahead.
I'll let you finish. No, so in goal setting, when we had the staffing request, there was on there to make 3 part-time librarians full-time. And again, I had mentioned earlier, a lot of work we did before we even got here to the council is one of the things we talked about with our library director, Kelly, was I just don't know that we can afford all three of those in 1 year. So can we work at maybe trying to phase them in one a year? So what's in the budget right now is just one of those, part-time to full-time. So it's just that difference between a part-time to full-time.
Okay.
That's in the budget.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Anything else from council?
I guess I'd like to just ask, I see a huge discrepancy between the actual expenditures of 2021 versus the budgeted for 2023, which to me indicates that you guys come in under budget when you're actually spending throughout the year, which is great. I'm curious, and I'm assuming after my conversation with Administrator Gaines that you guys have already tried to scrutinize everything you possibly can. But I also would like to hear from staff if they've reported anything to you that were what you might call nice to haves, where we could tighten it up, a little bit. If there is nothing, if there's no wiggle room, I understand that because we're really not talking about a huge dip in our taxpayers' pocketbook. However, if there are some nice to haves, I'd love to hear them, not just items from the CIP, but how can we prevent our overall budget from continuous growth? Because we're not going to get it back once we approve it this year.
Oh, I can't think of nice to haves, but.
Big question.
One of the things that I do want to just point out is that, I think what's tough about our budget every year is that personnel costs. When you look at the general fund budgets, when we were first talking about general fund, I think it was like 68% of its personnel costs. So if you want to try to make some significant changes in the general fund budgets, it's pretty much about staffing. Now, I understand there's capital. Staffing, really when it gets down to it, is staffing and capital. And when you think about what we do at the city, that's really what it's about, right? It's about services, it's libraries and fire and police and parks and all of those services. And we also know from the capital side, it's all the infrastructure, right? It's the sewer, it's the stormwater. So the tough part that gets to be is, I don't know if I want to use the word fluff, but that's what's hard is that there's not a lot of that other stuff that's in there. Or even when we talk about utility costs, that's in people's budget. Can't really budget less. It's going to be what it is, and unfortunately for this year we budgeted for some increases in our utility costs. So I think that's hard. Now in saying all that, I'll be the first to say, are there things in people's budget like training, education and training? Yeah. I think for me, my worry about that always is, okay, if we delay it or take it out for a year, what did we gain by doing that too? And my concern is now in a tough recruiting time, now here's one more thing that we're going to have to tell people, oh, and by the way, we don't pay for your licensing and some of that. So I understand those aren't necessary, but I also worry about those kind of things. And I think, even when we develop the CIP is we talk about the CIP and of course it's a lot of infrastructure, but there's a lot of projects on there that don't have to happen, but we also know Cedar Falls, right? To make it a great place, we got to try to balance the quality of life projects with the infrastructure, whether it's the river project, her center expansion, all those quality of life type projects that can be tough too. How do you balance that infrastructure with those projects that don't have to happen, but a lot of people want them, so I don't know if that kind of helps, but.
Yeah, actually, that's exactly what I was going to say as well. Is the need to haves or your sanitary sewer, your public safety. What often suffers in times like this is your quality of life projects, because those are the library, the parks, the other projects that Jennifer mentioned. But if you want to keep a good, great, vibrant community, that's kind of the three legs of the stool. You have public safety, you have the infrastructure, and then the third leg of that is the quality of life. And if we want to cut those, I think we're really doing our citizens a disservice.
And sorry, some of those pay for themselves. And I'm not saying that anything that I'm sure you already know, but like when you talk to the tourism folks, not only is it good for us, but when you talk to the tourism folks and you ask, like, what's the breakdown for what do the bike trails bring in? It's a good amount of cash. What will the river project bring in? Well, we've had those numbers, right? And I think it's a fair amount of cash that's projected there. Also, I always think about like what brought me back to Cedar Falls for that after that little stint when I didn't live here for 5 years? Well, I know what brought me back, and I also know that those things help to make my house worth more. So we're all kind of getting paid. And I know I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know, but I think it's important things to remember that they really do. We all get paid in some way when we're living in a very vibrant community. And so even though there are things that we don't think of that are generating income, they actually are.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Byers.
I just have one more short question. Had we not spent the $4.5 million for the remodel last year on City Hall, would that money not have been rolled over into our budget this year? Where did that money come from that we spent on that City Hall remodel? That's just my question.
So as you recall, the council has a policy that they take the general fund savings that we have annually every year and put it into a one-time capital improvement. And through the years, the council has identified different projects that this is what we'll use those monies for. That was one of the expenditures. One of the other expenditures was the public safety building. I can't think offhand what some of the others are, but that's where those monies come from, and the council could allocate those for other types of projects.
Okay. No, that's what I wondered, and that's what I thought. And I got run over pretty hard on that vote, so the council voted to remodel. But all I'm saying is, had we kept that money, we wouldn't have to find these things now. That's all. Thank you.
Any other discussion items? I'll also open it, if not from council, open it to the public. If anyone from the public would want to speak on what's before us tonight. I'm seeing no attendees on Zoom. We have a few here in the gallery, so it's your opportunity. Seeing none, then we have a motion and second to have these cuts go through. Does anybody need me to read them again? I think we're fairly well set. So motion and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously. And I will say that this, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Motion and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Well, thank you. We are adjourned.